So we have a pretty landmark SCOTUS case, I'd say. This has to do with transgender procedures, operations on minor children. It's being referred to as gender-affirming care, which I find to be euphemistic.
Euphemism.
Evil.
But you will see that around. Basically, it's in regards to whether or not transgender surgeries, hormones, it's like the whole gamut of making decisions for children, changing their sexes. They're going to refer to it as gender, but that's what's going on here. SCOTUS is hearing it right now, and a little bit of background on the case, just so you guys know. Josh, I know you're in D.C. today, and Tommy's down there with you. But in June 2023, a law went into effect in Tennessee, which bans doctors and healthcare providers from giving so-called gender-affirming care to minors, including surgery, puberty blockers, and hormones. The American Civil Liberties Union, ACLU, the Biden administration, and several teenage plaintiffs sued. The law protecting Tennessee's children was upheld by the Sixth Court Circuit in December 2023. SCOTUS
Circuit Court.
Yes, Circuit Court. SCOTUS took up the case in June of 2024, calling it United States versus Scrimetti. Today, the court will hear oral arguments for and against Tennessee's law banning irreversible gender transition procedures for children. The central constitutional question is whether or not Tennessee law SB 1 unlawfully discriminates under the 14th Amendment or constitutes a legitimate exercise of state authority to protect minors from medically and scientifically uncertain procedures.
That good old 14th Amendment keeps popping up, right?
What is the 14th Amendment, Erica? People need a refresher.
Yeah, so the 14th Amendment is one of a set of amendments that went into effect after the Civil War, and they were intended to help bring Black Americans, former slaves, into full citizenship. The 14th Amendment in this case is being utilized for its Equal Protection Clause, and the Equal Protection Clause is basically that you cannot discriminate on an American citizen based on XYZ under the law. Everyone's entitled to due process and equal protection under the law. And of course, this has been in modern times. Prior to Roe v. Wade, we had a case in Connecticut that interpreted the 14th Amendment as having this right to privacy. Mm-hmm. Right. And since then, it has been used in all of these sort of sex reproductive, quote unquote, rights cases to argue that we have a right to privacy. We have a right to this under the law. Griswold, thank you. I cannot believe I just gave a class about this. I'm like, whoa. Whoa.
Hey, I've been traveling. It took me a hot minute.
I know. Griswold v. Connecticut, Erica.
Keep you humble, Erica. You can't. Right. You're not a constitutional lawyer.
You've lived in Connecticut longer than I have, so.
Yeah, exactly. So here the ACLU is going to argue this morning before the court that under the 14th Amendment due process anti-discrimination, Tennessee is discriminating against children with gender dysphoria, forbidding them from having access to this so-called care, which is actually castration, hormonal therapy, blah, 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 that has irreversible effects. But they're going to argue that it's discrimination. It's interesting, though, and we might get into this a little bit further, the lead lawyer for the ACLU here, Chase Strangio, who's a woman who now identifies as a man, she also admitted on national television yesterday that she's also going to argue that this is really about the parents' rights to do whatever they want to their children. Because, of course, the kids, as she says in the interview, can't consent to this kind of care. She's talking about, she dropped the age of 2 years old. She's saying 2-year-olds know what they want and parents should be able to do whatever they want to that child. And that's what her argument's going to be, is that we're discriminating against the parents of these children and telling them what they can do. There's the interview. I mean,
for those wondering why this individual was chosen, it becomes pretty clear in this quick video. I'm not going to play all of it, but the voice will definitely surprise you.
Strangio, Chase, thanks so much for being here. Really appreciate it. So the case comes at a time when 26 states have passed laws restricting healthcare treatments for transgender youth, according to a CNN analysis of data from the nonprofit think tank Movement Advancement Project. So how do you plan to argue before the U.S. Supreme Court in a case that could have wide-ranging implications beyond the state of Tennessee?
Well, thank you for having me, Jake. And obviously, this is a critical inflection point for transgender people across the country. We're coming off of an election season where transgender people played an outside role in people's consciousness in terms of the way in which we were situated as a threat to others. And when we look at the map of states that ban this type of evidence-based healthcare, we went from 0 states that had these bans in 2020 to now more than half the country. So before the court tomorrow, the question is really a simple one as I see it. It's really, this is a law that bans medical treatment only when it is prescribed inconsistent with an individual's sex. Our argument is that treats people differently because of their sex, and therefore the court has to treat it like all other forms of sex discrimination, and that's why it's unconstitutional.
Oh, man.
Wow. Okay. Thanks, Lola. That was
I would have never been able to guess what this individual's voice sounded like. I mean, just seeing. It's funny. I know they're sending this lawyer, the ACLU, sending this lawyer to make a point, obviously, but it's, to me, the point almost is in reverse. It's to see someone clearly just doing everything they possibly can to pretend to be something that they are not, but the voice not trailing, I think, is this maybe the most stark reminder of what could potentially be done to these children.
To me, again, it's just worth recalling that, the left has insisted that parents have no rights for so long. Like if you wanted to homeschool your children, they'd be like, no, you should send them to our government schools. Mm-hmm. And if you're like, hey, if I have to send my kids to a public school, I don't want them to get your, crazy sex education stuff. I'd prefer to keep that to my, teach my kids. Oh, you're against, why? So for years and years and decades, the left has been against parents exerting control over their kids. I don't want my kids to see porno books. And they're like, oh my gosh, you're against reading and all this other stuff.
You're a book banner.
And then finally,
the ACLU themselves went after that.
Having rejected this idea that parents should have any agency in their own children's lives at all when it comes to their education and uprearing, now they turn on a dime and they're enlisting our own words against us. Hey, we want to mutilate the genitals of little children, and you believe in parents' rights, so therefore you should be totally in favor of this. You haven't believed in parents' rights at all, and now you're going to use it so that you can scar our children? No way. Screw you. Right. These people are so full of baloney.
And I know Matt Walsh is down there. I know Chloe Cole is down there. There's a lot of big names on the Hill. This, of course, has a lot of implications. I think one of the biggest arguments, too, if I may, is that, and it's worth bringing up because it keeps getting brought up, is that the ominous line of would you rather have a living daughter or a dead son, kind of made popular by the What is a Woman documentary. But it's the idea that for these children who struggle with gender identity, that they might unfortunately take their own lives. And there's actually a lot of evidence pointing to quite the opposite. People that receive these type of gender interventions actually have much higher suicide rates and much higher anxiety and depression and things like that.
They have all those problems that they had before, plus they've mutilated their body.
Right, it's a chicken and the egg too. And to your point, Josh, about the hypocrisy, they kind of want to have it both ways. It's if they do have the transition, the reason why they're suicidal or whatever, it's societal pressure. And if they don't get it, then it also will. They'll also have problems. So it's all pointing one side, and it's medical intervention at the incentive, the monetary incentive of a lot of these health industry
corporations.
People.
Yeah, and they make a lot of money on having these customers for life. And it's kind of crass. I don't mean to be, but the problem isn't what's between your legs; it's what's between your ears. These people are suffering from gender dysphoria. I don't mean to be callous about it or flippant, but they do. They do need help. They do need, what they don't need is, here are ways that you can castrate yourself or mutilate your genitals and do all these life-altering surgeries that, again, you're talking about a case where it's interesting, by the way, even gays are starting to get involved in this issue because they look at this like, you're attracted to this other side. You must have been born in the wrong body, and let's mutilate your body so that So that's the way to kind of cure being gay. That's a whole other issue, but that's why gays actually might start turning against the whole trans stuff.
Well, and they have. We've got Gays Against Groomers. Right. We've got LGB without the T. Martina Navratilova is on that. Yeah.
But I just again. You want to do this to your body after the age 18, I think it's still a stupid idea, and I'd be totally in favor of banning it all, but absolutely ban it for kids. You're talking about life-altering decisions, and I totally feel like we need to investigate a lot of these suburban moms who act like these actresses who feel like it's a mark of, making it in society by having a kid who's trans. It's really a lot of these moms that are going kind of crazy.
It's the show moms. It's the moms who show up on
Right.
all of the pageant shows
Here's my
and the
pet
dance. And
poodle.
here's my pet poodle and here's my trans child. I think there was a story that we talked about back in the spring that the rate of children of Hollywood actors who are transing themselves is close to 40%. And you're like, that is not even close to a natural phenomenon that we're
Yeah,
talking
one in a
about here.
thousand would be more normal.
Yes. And Abigail Schreier has done a great job of researching the idea of social contagion as the driving force of this whole trans movement. I think that in her that interview that we just watched later on, Chase brings up that, we have all these longitudinal studies now that prove that gender affirming care is life-saving. And the problem is, as you pointed out, Josh, those studies that she's referring to are funded by the very big pharma corporations that are benefiting off of these surgeries, which run $30,000 to $120,000 a pop. Plus, it turns you into a lifelong patient of these companies. If you actually look at studies that were performed outside the aegis of big pharma, we go to Europe. Europe was about 25 years ahead of us on adopting this so-called gender-affirming care for kids. Those longitudinal studies show us that, as you said, suicidal ideation actually increases the earlier and the more violently you rip apart these kids' bodies. Not only that, we had in the United States an NIH study that was done longitudinally on the effects of this, and the results have not been published because they did not back up the ideology of the trans movement. I'm going to pull that study right now and put it in the chat because that was a absolute scandal of the overthrow of any pretense of scientific objectivity in our medical institutions when the NIH said, we're not going to publish that one because the results show that actually gender affirming care in minors is harmful.
And you look at Europe, and overall, no question, Europe is much more leftist than the United States, of course. But I do feel like in Europe, they still have that kind of practicality to them. So like in England, they're stopped doing this stuff. In other countries, like I can't remember if it was Sweden or whatever, they stopped doing it too. Like they look at the evidence.
They're much more moderate on abortion as well.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like it's just that they temper, their progressive values with, real world experience, at least somewhat. Whereas the leftists in this country are so pure ideological, and it's 100%. And like, you're a villain if you're like a sliver off. And so there's never this ability on the left to say, maybe we're going too far.
Could that be a product of the parliamentary system, Josh?
No, I don't think so. I think it's the United States. For so long, both the left and right have imbibed this idea, we're a constitutional republic based on like the Constitution, and we're not based on a people.
We're based on ideas, right?
Or, America is an idea.
Right.
As opposed to a people
heresy.
that live here, we're a culture, we're a people, we live in this land, Wall Street Journal is, America's an idea, and we can import 1 million people from another country, and as long as they love the market, everything's fine. Yeah. It's like, no, actually, I'm an 11th generation American, thank you, and a new generation American. Come on, I love you, but we're not just ideas. We are a people too. We're not just a parking lot. So J.D. Vance talks about this better than anyone in public life today. Trump understands it intuitively in his bones. But J.D. Vance can articulate it in a better way. Yeah. We're not just, we're not interchangeable. Yes, we can welcome it. But anyway, that's why I think Europe, there's still that. France has it actually better than most countries, even though they're kind of crazy. France has an identity. They are French. And so, conservatives in France need to lean on that. But like, that's why I think some of these countries like Sweden and in England are like pushing back at some of this trans stuff, goes, wait a minute, what are we doing to our kids? Whereas in the United States, the progressive left is like, ideology is what matters, and they're at service to the ideology, and they never let reality kind of tap them on the shoulder and go, are you sure about that? Mm-hmm. What are we doing here? Why are we doing this? They never temper themselves that way.